He walked in and saw his father in another woman's arms, and in that one moment, blinded by fear, by rage, by everything he thought he knew, Leonard Scott destroyed the only person who'd refused to give up on his father. Leonard hadn't been home in 3 weeks. He'd been in London closing a deal that would change his company forever, but something kept pulling at him, a voice in the back of his mind that said, "Go home, see your father." So he left early, 3 days ahead of schedule. He walked through the front door, tired but smiling. He wanted to surprise Thomas, maybe sit with him, talk. It had been too long. He climbed the stairs and heard voices coming from his father's room, Thomas's labored breathing, a soft groan, then her voice gentle, encouraging. Leonard's stomach tightened. He pushed the door open. Olivia Grant's arms were wrapped around his father. Thomas's face tilted back, eyes closed, breath coming hard. Their bodies pressed so close Leonard's mind couldn't process what he was seeing. He didn't see the 6 steps his father had just taken for the first time in 8 months. He didn't see Thomas's legs shaking, about to collapse. He didn't see Olivia catch him the way someone who cares catches someone who's falling. All Leonard saw was betrayal. "What the hell are you doing with my father?" Olivia spun around, startled, her arms still supporting Thomas. Leonard's face went pale, then red. "Get your hands off him. Mr. Scott, please, I can explain." "Explain what?" His voice cracked. "You think I don't see what's happening here?" He shoved her. Hard. Olivia stumbled backward, her arms slamming into the nightstand. Blood appeared on her skin. Mrs. Chen stood frozen in the doorway. Staff members whispered. "She's been alone with him every day." Leonard grabbed Olivia by the arm. "You're done. Pack your things. Get out." Thomas tried to speak. "Leonard," she was helping, but his voice was too weak. The walking had drained him. Leonard looked at his father and saw exhaustion, confusion, vulnerability. "She's been taking advantage of him," he thought. Olivia didn't fight. She walked out without another word, blood running down her arm, dignity still intact. But her heart was breaking. Not for herself, for Thomas, who'd just had his miracle stolen. Before we begin, hit like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Because if you've ever given everything and been accused of the worst, this story will break you open. Sometimes grace works through the people we destroy, and what Leonard's about to discover will change everything. 2:17 in the morning, Leonard sat in the blue glow of the computer screen, his coffee long gone cold. He'd been watching for 3 hours now. The first video started simple enough. August 15th, 3:42 p.m. Olivia walked into his father's room carrying printed diagrams. She showed them to Thomas, pointing at different exercises. Leg lifts, ankle rotations, balance work. Thomas looked at the paper, then at her. His mouth moved. Leonard couldn't hear the audio through the old system, but he could read his father's lips. "I couldn't even lift my foot yesterday." Olivia's response was clear. She pointed at Thomas, then at the calendar on the wall, her expression gentle but firm. Yesterday was yesterday. Today is today. Leonard leaned closer. For 20 minutes, Olivia worked with his father. Patient, steady, never rushing. When Thomas managed to lift his leg 3 inches off the bed, his whole face changed. Shock first. Then something Leonard hadn't seen in months. Joy. Olivia clapped softly, smiled, and Thomas smiled back. Leonard's throat tightened. He clicked to the next video. September 3rd. Thomas stood with his walker, gripping the handles so hard his knuckles were white. Olivia stood beside him, one hand hovering near his back, not touching, just ready. Thomas took 1 step, then his legs started shaking. Panic flashed across his face. Olivia moved fast. Her arms went around his torso, supporting his weight, and she lowered him gently into the wheelchair. The exact position Leonard had seen today. The exact embrace he'd misunderstood. Thomas sat there, head in his hands, shoulders shaking. He was crying. Olivia didn't speak. She just pulled a chair next to him and sat, handed him water, waited. After a few minutes, Thomas looked up at her. Even without sound, Leonard could see his father mouth the words, "I'm sorry." Olivia shook her head. She pointed at the walker, then at Thomas. Then she made a walking motion with her fingers. "You will walk. I'm not giving up on you." Leonard's hand trembled on the mouse. He clicked another video. September 22nd. This time, Thomas stood and took 2 steps, then 3, then 5. His legs gave out, but Olivia caught him, and when she lowered him into the chair, Thomas buried his face in his hands again. But this time, he wasn't crying from frustration. He was crying from joy. Olivia knelt beside the wheelchair. She took his hand, and Leonard watched his father mouth the words that would haunt him forever. "You gave me my life back." Leonard stood up so fast his chair fell over. He stumbled to the window, gripping the frame, his breath coming hard. "Oh God, what have I done?" He pressed his forehead against the cold glass. Outside, the rain was coming down harder now. The world blurred. Behind him, the video kept playing. He could hear it, the silent footage of his father learning to walk again, learning to hope again, because of her. And he'd thrown her out like garbage. Leonard's chest tightened, his hands started shaking. He turned back to the desk and clicked another video. October 1st. The camera showed Olivia in the corner of the room, sitting on the floor, her head in her hands. Thomas was asleep in his chair, exhausted from therapy, and Olivia was crying. Her whole body shook with silent sobs. She wiped her eyes, took a breath, composed herself. Then she stood, checked on Thomas, and went back to organizing his medications. She never asked for help, never complained, never stopped. Leonard sank into the chair. The next video was dated 2 weeks ago. Olivia's face looked thinner, tired, but she still showed up, still smiled at Thomas, still believed. Leonard opened another window on his computer, pulled up Olivia's payroll file, and that's when he saw it. Direct deposit, 40% of her stated salary. The rest, withheld at her request. Reason: equipment and supplies for patient care, personal expense. She'd been paying to help his father. Leonard's vision blurred. He clicked back to the footage. Today's date, 4 p.m. He watched Thomas take 6 steps. 6 beautiful, impossible steps. Watched his legs start to give. Watched Olivia catch him in that perfect therapeutic hold. Watched his father whisper, "Thank you." And then watched himself burst through the door. Watched himself destroy everything. Leonard put his head in his hands. "Oh God," he whispered into the empty room. "What have I done?" Leonard didn't sleep. He sat in that chair until the sun came up, watching video after video. 8 months of footage. 8 months of Olivia showing up every single afternoon at 3:30, no matter what. There was the day Thomas threw his water bottle across the room in frustration. Olivia didn't flinch. She picked it up, refilled it, and sat beside him until he was ready to try again. There was the session where Thomas's leg cramped so badly he screamed. Olivia massaged it for 20 minutes, patient and gentle, until the pain passed. There was the afternoon she arrived with her eyes red and swollen. Clearly she'd been crying about something. But the moment she walked into Thomas's room, she smiled. She showed up for him anyway. Leonard's hands wouldn't stop shaking. At 6 in the morning, he grabbed his keys and headed downstairs. Alan was already in the kitchen, preparing morning tea. "Where is she?" Leonard asked. His voice came out hoarse. "Where did Olivia go?" Alan looked up, surprised. I don't know, sir. She left around 1 this morning, didn't say where." Leonard's chest tightened. "Did she leave a forwarding address? A phone number?" "No, sir. She just left." Leonard ran a hand through his hair. "What about her things, her room?" "Empty." Leonard turned and headed toward the guest wing anyway. He pushed open the door to Olivia's room. Alan was right. Empty. The bed was made. The surfaces wiped clean. It looked like no one had ever lived there at all, except for one thing. On the dresser, a small stack of receipts held down by a rock. Leonard walked over and picked up the top one. Meadowbrook, nursing home supply, resistance bands, $47. The next one, medical equipment, depot, balance board, $83. The next, therapeutic footwear, $126. Leonard flipped through them. Dozens of receipts, hundreds of dollars, all of it Olivia's own money. Beneath the receipts, a work schedule from Meadowbrook Nursing Home, night shift, 3 days a week, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. She'd been working 2 jobs, just to help his father. Leonard's legs gave out. He sat on the edge of the bed, the receipts trembling in his hands. On the nightstand, he noticed something else, a small notepad. The top page had been torn off, but the imprint remained. He held it up to the light. "Mum deposited $800. Should cover this month. Love you. Leonard closed his eyes. She'd been sending money home, to her mother, and still somehow found a way to buy equipment for Thomas. A soft knock at the door. Alan stepped inside. "Sir, your father is awake. He's asking for Miss Grant." Leonard looked up. "What do I tell him?" Alan's expression was gentle but firm. "The truth, sir. It's all we have left." Leonard stood slowly, the receipts still in his hand. He walked down the hall to his father's room. Thomas was sitting in his wheelchair by the window, staring out at nothing. "Dad." Thomas didn't turn. "Is she gone?" Leonard's throat closed. "Yes. Did you apologize?" I tried to find her. She's not." "Did you apologize?" Thomas's voice was quiet, broken. "Not yet." Thomas finally turned, and the look in his eyes, disappointment, grief, something deeper than anger, nearly broke Leonard in half. "She gave me everything," Thomas whispered, "and you took it all away." Leonard's hands shook. "I know. I watched the footage. I saw. Everything. Then you know what you destroyed." Leonard nodded. He couldn't speak. Thomas turned back to the window. "Find her. Make this right. Or don't come back." Leonard drove to the address listed on Olivia's employment file. A small apartment complex in Riverside, 40 minutes from the estate. He knocked on apartment 3B. No answer. He knocked again. Harder. A door opened across the hall. An elderly woman in a faded robe peered out. "You looking for Olivia?" "Yes." "Do you know where she is?" The woman studied him. Her eyes narrowed. "You're him, aren't you? The one who fired her?" Leonard's jaw tightened. "Please, I need to find her. She doesn't live here anymore. Moved out 2 months back to save money. Do you know where she went?" The woman hesitated, then sighed. "She works nights at Meadowbrook. That's all I know." Leonard was already heading back to his car. Meadowbrook Nursing Home sat on the edge of town, a low brick building with tired landscaping. Leonard pulled into the parking lot just after 7 in the morning. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed. A nurse sat behind the front desk, filing charts. "I'm looking for Olivia Grant," Leonard said. The nurse looked up. Her expression shifted when she recognized him. "You've got some nerve showing up here. Please, I just need to talk to her. She's with a patient, and I'm not interrupting her for you." Leonard stepped back. "Then I'll wait. Suit yourself." He sat in the hard plastic chair by the window. The minutes crawled. He watched through the glass as Olivia moved through the corridor with an elderly man, helping him practice walking with a cane. Her movements were the same ones he'd seen in the videos. Patient, gentle, focused. The man took 4 shaky steps and smiled. Olivia smiled back. And something in Leonard's chest cracked open. 6 o'clock came. Shift change. Olivia emerged from the patient wing, pulling her jacket on. She looked exhausted. Her eyes had dark circles beneath them. She froze when she saw Leonard. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. Leonard followed. "Olivia, please, just give me 5 minutes." She pushed through the door into the grey morning light. "I don't have anything to say to you." "Then just listen." She kept walking toward her car, a beat-up Honda with a dented bumper. Leonard's voice cracked. "I watched the footage. All of it. 8 months of it." Olivia stopped. Her hand was on the car door handle, but she didn't open it. "I know what you did for my father," Leonard continued. "I know you paid for his equipment yourself. I know you worked 2 jobs just to afford it. I know you never asked me for anything." Olivia's jaw tightened. "And now what? You watched some videos and decided I'm acceptable?" "No." Leonard stepped closer. "Nothing makes what I did acceptable. I was wrong. Completely wrong. You humiliated me in front of everyone." Her voice shook. "You shoved me. You called me a predator. You threw me out like I was nothing. I know. You have no idea what you took from me." Tears filled her eyes now. "I gave your father everything I had, every afternoon, every ounce of strength, and you destroyed it in 5 minutes." Leonard pulled out his phone, showed her the bank statements, the receipts. "You paid for his therapy out of your own pocket. You worked overnight just to afford it." Olivia looked away. "That doesn't matter now." "It matters to me." Leonard's voice dropped. "My father won't speak to me. He told me to find you, or not come back." Olivia wiped her eyes. "Good. He's right. I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to him." Leonard paused. "I want to make this right. I'm creating a foundation. For stroke survivors who can't afford rehabilitation. Olivia laughed bitterly. You think money fixes this? No, but it's a start. He met her eyes. I'm funding it with $50 million, and I want you to run it. As Director of Patient Care, full benefits, $250,000 a year. You hire your own staff. You set your own protocols. Olivia stared at him. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. Leonard's voice was raw. But my father does. He wrote you a letter, asked me to give you this. He handed her a folded paper. Thomas's handwriting. Olivia opened it. Read it. Her hands trembled. He wants you back, Leonard said quietly. Not as a maid, as family. Olivia folded the letter, pressed it to her chest. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, I'll come back. For him, not for you. Leonard nodded. And I have conditions, she continued. You don't question my medical decisions. You don't interfere with my methods. And you publicly clear my name with every person who saw what happened. Done. Olivia opened her car door, then stopped. One more thing. Anything. When your father walks again, really walks, you'll be there to see it, and you'll remember what you almost destroyed. Leonard's eyes filled. I'll never forget. Olivia returned to the estate 3 days later. The West Wing had been transformed. Contractors had installed wheelchair ramps, safety rails, therapy equipment. What used to be a drawing room was now a rehabilitation center. Leonard stood in the main hallway when she arrived, hands in his pockets, unsure what to say. Olivia walked past him without a word. Thomas was in the therapy room, sitting by the window. When he saw her, his whole face changed. Olivia. She crossed the room and knelt beside his wheelchair. I'm here. Thomas reached for her hand, held it like he'd been drowning and she was air. I thought you were gone for good. I was, she said softly. But you asked me to come back. Thank you. His voice cracked. Thank you. Leonard watched from the doorway. The reunion he should have had with his father. The forgiveness he didn't deserve. Thomas looked past Olivia and met Leonard's eyes. There was no warmth there, just distance. Come see what we've built, Dad, Leonard said quietly. Thomas nodded, but he didn't let go of Olivia's hand. Over the next 2 weeks, Olivia built a team. Dr. James Chen, a neurologist who'd been following her work for months, signed on immediately. Then Patricia Morrison, a physical therapist from the VA. David Okafor, who'd trained in Nigeria and brought techniques Leonard had never seen before. The team worked like family. They laughed during breaks. They celebrated small victories. They believed in the work. But between Leonard and Olivia, there was only silence. He tried once, brought her coffee the way she used to drink it. 2 sugars, no cream. She looked at the cup, then at him. I can make my own coffee. She walked away. Leonard poured it down the sink. The foundation's first patient arrived on a Tuesday morning. Margaret Chen, Dr. Chen's mother, 67. Left side paralyzed from a stroke 4 months earlier. She rolled through the door in a transport wheelchair, her face hollow with defeat. They told me I'm done, she said to Olivia. That this is it. Olivia knelt beside her. They were wrong. Margaret's eyes filled. How do you know? Because I've seen what people can do when someone refuses to give up on them. Margaret looked at Thomas, who was standing now, leaning on his cane but standing. That's Mr. Scott, Olivia said. 8 months ago, doctors said he'd never leave his wheelchair. Now look at him. Thomas walked forward, slow, unsteady, but walking. He stopped in front of Margaret. It's going to hurt. Some days you'll hate us, but we're not going anywhere. Margaret started crying. Olivia handed her a tissue. Let's get started. Leonard watched from his office window as Olivia worked with Margaret that first afternoon. The same patience, the same belief, the same refusal to accept defeat. And he realized something that made his chest ache. Olivia had been doing this all along. Not for recognition, not for money, not even for gratitude. She did it because she couldn't walk away from people who needed her. Even when walking away would have been easier. Even when staying cost her everything. That evening, Leonard found Olivia in the therapy room, cleaning equipment. Can I help? He asked. She didn't look up. I've got it. Olivia, don't. Her voice was quiet but firm. Don't try to fix this with words. You want to make it right? Then show up. Do the work. Prove you actually care about these people, and not just your guilt. She walked past him, turned off the lights, and left. Leonard stood in the dark. And for the first time in his life, he understood the difference between saying sorry and becoming sorry, between wanting forgiveness and earning change. He had a long way to go. 3 weeks into Margaret Chen's therapy, something changed. Olivia was working with her in the main therapy room. Margaret's left foot, the one that hadn't moved since her stroke, was strapped into a specialized brace. "I can't feel anything," Margaret whispered. "It's like my leg doesn't exist." Olivia knelt beside her. "Close your eyes. Don't try to move it. Just think about your toes. Imagine them wiggling." Margaret closed her eyes. Her face tightened with concentration. Nothing happened. Thomas sat in the corner, watching. He'd been coming every morning now, mentoring new patients, showing them it was possible. "Try again," Olivia said softly. Margaret's breath came faster. Her hands gripped the armrests. And then, so small it was almost invisible, her left big toe moved. Just a twitch, barely a millimeter, but it moved. Margaret's eyes flew open. "Did I? Did you see?" "I saw it." Olivia's voice shook. "You did it." Margaret started sobbing. "I felt it. Oh my God, I felt it." Dr. Chen, who'd been standing nearby reviewing charts, dropped everything and rushed over. "Mom, I moved my toe." Margaret grabbed her son's hand. "I moved my toe." The entire staff stopped. Patricia, David, Sarah, everyone gathered around. Thomas stood from his chair, no walker, just his cane, and crossed the room. "That's it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's the beginning." Margaret looked up at him, tears streaming. "You really did this? You really walked again?" Thomas smiled. "Because she wouldn't let me quit." He gestured to Olivia. "And she won't let you quit either." Leonard watched from the hallway. He'd been doing that a lot lately. Watching, learning, seeing what Olivia had been trying to show his father all along. This wasn't about physical therapy. It was about belief, about refusing to accept what the world said was impossible. He thought about the man he'd been 3 weeks ago, the man who'd walked into his father's room and seen only what he expected to see. Fear, suspicion, betrayal. He'd been so convinced he was protecting his father, so certain he knew best, but he'd been protecting himself. From vulnerability, from the discomfort of needing someone, from the truth that sometimes the people who help us most are the ones we least expect. That evening, after the patients had gone home and the staff had left, Leonard found Olivia sitting alone in the therapy room. She wasn't working, just sitting, staring at Margaret's walker. "You gave her hope today," Leonard said quietly from the doorway. Olivia didn't turn. She gave it to herself. "No." Leonard stepped inside. "You did, the same way you gave it to my father." Olivia finally looked at him. Her eyes were tired, but something in them had softened, just slightly. "Why do you do it?" Leonard asked. "Even after everything I put you through, why do you keep showing up?" Olivia was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Because my mother never got this chance. She had a stroke when I was 19. No insurance, no resources, just me trying to figure it out alone." Her voice wavered. "She never walked again. She spent 4 years in that chair before she died. And every single day, I wondered if I'd done enough, if I'd tried hard enough, if maybe she could have." She stopped, swallowed hard. "That's why," she whispered. "Because every person I help walk is the second chance my mother never got." Leonard's throat closed. For the first time, he understood. This wasn't a job for Olivia. It was a mission, a calling, a way of carrying her mother's memory forward. And he'd almost destroyed it. "I'm sorry," Leonard said. And this time, the words meant something different, deeper. Olivia nodded. Didn't say anything. But she didn't leave either. They sat in that quiet room together, not as employer and employee, not as enemy and victim, just as two people learning to be human again. The call came on a Thursday morning. Leonard was in his office when his assistant knocked. "Sir, there's someone here to see you. Marcus Dalton." Leonard looked up. "Dalton?" "He says it's urgent." Leonard hadn't seen Marcus Dalton in 15 years, not since his father cut ties with him over Medicare fraud allegations. The man had rebuilt his empire, since then, Dalton Health Systems, 27 rehabilitation facilities across 3 states. Dalton walked in, wearing a $1,000 suit and a practiced smile. "Leonard, it's been too long." Leonard didn't shake his hand. "What do you want?" Dalton sat without being invited. "I'm here as a friend. Your little foundation is making waves, good waves, but you're disrupting some very established systems. That's the point. I'm sure it is. Dalton's smile thinned. But you're also creating liability concerns. Your director, Miss Grant, she doesn't have proper licensing, no degree, no certification. What happens when someone gets hurt? She's more qualified than half the therapists I've met. I'm sure she's lovely, but legally speaking, you're vulnerable. Dalton leaned forward. I'd hate to see something happen that forces the state to shut you down. Leonard's jaw tightened. Is that a threat? It's friendly advice. Dalton stood. Think about it. You're doing good work. Don't let one unqualified person ruin it. He left. Leonard sat there, a cold weight settling in his chest. 3 days later, the news broke. Leonard's phone buzzed with alerts. He opened the first link. Troubled pastor foundation director raises questions. His stomach dropped. The article featured a scanned document, official letterhead, from St. Catherine's nursing facility. A termination letter dated 2019. Miss Olivia Grant was released from employment due to inappropriate conduct with a patient. Leonard's hands went numb. He scrolled further. Comments were already piling up. I knew something was off about her. These people prey on the vulnerable. Shut it down before someone gets hurt. Leonard grabbed his keys and ran. He found Olivia in the therapy room with Margaret. She was kneeling beside the wheelchair, guiding Margaret through leg exercises. Olivia, she looked up, saw his face. What's wrong? He held out his phone. Olivia took it. Read the article. Her face went pale. I never worked at St. Catherine's, she whispered. I know. This is a lie. All of it. Her voice shook. Who would? Dalton, Leonard said. It has to be. Margaret looked between them, confused. What's happening? Olivia handed Leonard his phone back. Her hands were trembling. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. People will believe it. We'll fight it, Leonard said. We'll get lawyers. They already believe it. Olivia's voice cracked. Look at the comments. They've already decided who I am. Leonard's phone buzzed again. Another news outlet. Then another. The story was spreading. Olivia stood slowly, walked to the window, pressed her forehead against the glass. I've spent my whole life trying to prove I'm more than my circumstances, she said quietly. No degree, no money, no credentials, just hard work and belief. She turned. Tears streamed down her face, and in one article, they erased all of it. Margaret wheeled closer. Olivia, we know the truth. Everyone here knows. But Olivia shook her head. 3 families already called this morning. They're pulling their loved ones out. They don't want me near them. Leonard's chest tightened. We'll fix this. How? Olivia's voice broke completely now. How do you fix a lie that people want to believe? She walked past him, out of the room. Leonard stood there, Margaret looking up at him with worry in her eyes. And for the second time, Leonard watched Olivia walk away not because she wanted to, but because someone had taken her dignity and torn it to pieces. Only this time, he wasn't the one who'd done it, but he was the one who had to fix it. Olivia stopped coming to the estate. She didn't quit, didn't make an announcement. She just stopped showing up. Leonard called her phone. No answer. He drove to Meadowbrook. The nurse at the desk said Olivia had taken a leave of absence. Where is she? I don't know. And if I did, I wouldn't tell you. Leonard stood in the parking lot, lost. Back at the foundation, the damage was spreading. 5 families pulled their loved ones out. The phone stopped ringing with new inquiries. Donors who'd pledged money suddenly had budget concerns. Margaret Chen was one of the few who stayed. I don't care what they say, she told Leonard. Olivia gave me my life back. I'm not leaving. But even Margaret's loyalty couldn't stop what was coming. The State Medical Board sent a formal notice. An investigation had been opened. Allegations of practicing medicine without a license. A hearing scheduled in 10 days. If the board ruled against them, the foundation would be shut down permanently. Leonard sat in his father's study that night, surrounded by legal documents he barely understood. Thomas wheeled himself in. He didn't say anything at first, just sat there in the dim light. I failed her again, Leonard finally said. Yes, Thomas replied quietly. You did. Leonard looked up, expecting anger, but his father's face held something else. Sadness. I spent 40 years building companies, Thomas continued, making deals, winning. And you know what I learned when I had that stroke? Leonard shook his head. That winning doesn't mean anything if you don't know who you're fighting for. Thomas leaned forward. You're sitting here drowning in paperwork. But Olivia's out there somewhere, alone, believing the world thinks she's a monster. I don't know where she is. Then find her. Thomas's voice was firm now. Stop hiding behind lawyers and documents. Go find her. And when you do, don't tell her you'll fix it. Show her she's not alone. Leonard drove for 2 hours before he found her. A small chapel on the edge of town. The parking lot was empty except for one beat-up Honda. Inside, the chapel was dim. Candles flickered near the altar. Olivia sat in the front pew, head bowed, hands folded. Leonard slid into the pew beside her, said nothing, just sat. After a long silence, Olivia spoke. My mother used to bring me here when I was little, when things got hard. Her voice was barely a whisper. She'd say, when people don't see you, God does. Leonard's throat tightened. I keep telling myself that, Olivia continued, that the truth matters, that God sees. But it doesn't stop the pain. I know. Olivia finally looked at him. Her eyes were red, exhausted. Why are you here? Because you shouldn't be alone. I've been alone before. I know. But not this time. Olivia looked back at the altar. A tear slid down her cheek. They're going to shut us down, aren't they? Not if I can help it. You can't fight this, Leonard. Dalton has money. Lawyers. Power. So do I. Leonard turned to face her. But more than that, we have something he doesn't. What? The truth. And people who've lived it. Olivia wiped her eyes. Margaret. And Thomas. And every patient whose life you changed. Leonard's voice grew stronger. They're going to testify. They're going to tell the board exactly who you are. Olivia's breath caught. You think it'll be enough? I don't know, Leonard admitted. But I'm not giving up. And neither are you. For the first time in days, something shifted in Olivia's face. Not hope. Not yet. But the possibility of it. She nodded slowly. Okay. Okay? Let's fight. Leonard felt something release in his chest. They sat together in that quiet chapel, candlelight dancing on the walls, and for the first time since the lie broke, Olivia didn't feel alone. And Leonard understood what his father had been trying to teach him all along. You don't save people by fixing their problems. You save them by standing beside them when everything falls apart. The State Medical Board hearing room was cold, sterile. 5 board members sat behind an elevated bench, faces unreadable. Dalton's legal team filled the front row. 4 attorneys in matching suits. Leonard sat beside Olivia. Patricia Okafor, the civil rights attorney David's sister had recommended, sat on Olivia's other side. The board chair cleared his throat. We're here to determine whether the Second Chance Foundation has engaged in unlicensed medical practice. Dalton's lead attorney stood, presented the forged Street Catherine's letter, called a handwriting expert who claimed Olivia's signature matched, brought forward anonymous testimonies from patients claiming they felt pressured, emphasized Olivia's lack of credentials. This woman, the attorney said, has no degree, no license, no formal training. She's practicing medicine on vulnerable people, and this board has a duty to protect the public. Olivia's hands trembled in her lap. Leonard reached over and covered them with his own. She didn't pull away. Patricia stood. Your Honor, may we call witnesses? The board chair nodded. The gallery doors opened. Margaret Chen wheeled herself in, but halfway down the aisle, she stopped, gripped the armrests, and stood. The room went silent. Margaret took 4 slow, deliberate steps, then 4 more. She reached the witness stand and turned to face the board. 3 months ago, doctors told me I'd never walk again. Insurance called me maximum medical improvement. Gave up on me. Her voice shook. Miss Grant didn't. She saw something in me nobody else could see. And now I'm standing here. A board member leaned forward. Mrs. Chen, we're not disputing Miss Grant's intentions. Then don't dispute her results. Margaret interrupted. I walked into Dalton's facility in a wheelchair, stayed 8 months, got worse. I walked into the Second Chance Foundation in a wheelchair. 6 weeks later, I'm standing. She sat down. Next, Thomas walked to the stand. No wheelchair, just his cane. He looked directly at Marcus Dalton in the gallery. Marcus and I were business partners 25 years ago, until I discovered he was defrauding Medicare. I turned him in. He rebuilt his empire. And now he's trying to destroy the one person who actually helps people instead of billing them. Thomas turned to the board. My son fired Miss Grant because he thought she was hurting me, but she was saving me. And the day he threw her out, I wanted to die. Not from the stroke, from the realization that we punish goodness because we don't recognize it. His voice cracked. Don't make the same mistake. Then came Robert Walsh, 80 years old, Vietnam veteran. He walked to the podium unassisted. Dalton's facility kept me 8 months, billed the VA $89,000. I left worse than I came. He pointed at Olivia. 6 weeks with her, free, and I'm walking. Patricia stood again. Your Honor, I'd like to call one final witness. The doors opened. A woman in a business suit walked in. Professional, confident. State your name for the record, Patricia said. Rebecca Kim, former Director of Marketing for Dalton Health Systems. Dalton's face went white. Rebecca pulled out a folder. 3 weeks ago, I resigned. I couldn't stay silent anymore. She handed documents to the board. These are internal emails from Mr. Dalton instructing his team to fabricate evidence against Miss Grant. She pulled out a USB drive. This contains audio of Mr. Dalton explicitly saying, I don't care if the accusations are true. Kill the program. Destroy the girl. The room erupted. The board chair banged his gavel. Order. Dalton's attorneys scrambled, whispered frantically. The board huddled for 15 minutes. When they returned, the chair's face was grim. The complaint against the Second Chance Foundation is dismissed. Furthermore, we're referring this matter to the State Attorney General for criminal investigation. The room exploded with applause. Olivia collapsed into Leonard's arms, sobbing. But outside, in the parking lot, Leonard's phone rang. Alan's voice was panicked. Sir, it's your father. He collapsed. Ambulance is on the way. Leonard's world stopped. Leonard and Olivia ran through the hospital doors together. Thomas was in the ICU. Second stroke. Left side, paralyzed again. When they reached his room, he was agitated. Monitors beeping frantically. Nurses trying to hold him still. Mr. Scott, you need to calm down. But Thomas fought them. His blood pressure spiked. 190 over 110. The doctor turned to Leonard. We may need to sedate him. No, Olivia said. She pushed past the nurses. Let me through. She sat beside Thomas and took his right hand, the one he could still move. Thomas, it's me. I'm here. His eyes found hers, wild, terrified. You're safe, she whispered. I'm not leaving. Slowly, so slowly, his breathing steadied. His grip loosened. The monitors started calming. Within 10 minutes, his blood pressure dropped to 145 over 90. The doctor stared at the monitors, stunned. I've never seen anything like that. Olivia didn't let go of his hand. 3 days later, Thomas woke up. His left side was weak, weaker than before. The doctor said recovery would be slow, uncertain. But when Thomas looked at Olivia, he smiled. Told you, he whispered. Can't get rid of me that easy. Olivia's eyes filled. Don't you ever scare me like that again. Deal. The news about Dalton broke nationally that week. Federal prosecutors filed charges. Fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. Marcus Dalton faced 20 years. His facilities were investigated. Hundreds of patients came forward with stories of unnecessary treatments, inflated bills, false hope sold for profit. Dalton Health Systems collapsed within months, and the Second Chance Foundation grew. 18 months later, the estate grounds were covered in white chairs, 200 guests, mostly foundation patients and their families. Olivia stood in the bridal suite, looking at herself in the mirror. Her dress was simple, elegant, real. A knock at the door. Thomas stepped in, wearing a tuxedo, leaning on his cane. You look beautiful, he said. Olivia's eyes filled. You're really going to do this? Walk you down the aisle? Thomas smiled. I've been practicing. She crossed the room and hugged him, held on tight. Thank you, she whispered, for believing in me when no one else did. You gave me my life back, Olivia. This is the least I can do. The music started. Thomas extended his arm. Olivia took it, and together, they walked down the aisle. Slow, steady, every step a miracle. Margaret Chen sat in the front row, wiping tears. Robert Walsh stood at attention. Dr. James Chen waited at the altar, his face full of love. Leonard stood beside James as best man. When Olivia passed, she met his eyes, and she smiled, not the cautious smile of someone still healing, but the real smile of someone who'd forgiven. Leonard smiled back, and for the first time in 2 years, he felt whole. 5 years later, the Second Chance Foundation operated in 11 states, 200 therapists trained in Olivia's methods, thousands of patients given hope. Thomas volunteered 4 days a week, until the day he passed peacefully in his sleep at 82. His journal entry the night before he died read, "I lived through 2 strokes. Olivia gave me years I wasn't supposed to have. I walked her down the aisle. I saw my foundation change lives. I have no regrets. This is what grace looks like." The study where Leonard first watched the security footage, the room where everything changed, became a memorial. The walls were covered with photos, hundreds of patients holding signs, "Second chances are real." In the center, a framed image, Olivia, holding Thomas after his first 6 steps, his face tilted back in gratitude, her arms supporting not just his body, but his hope. Beneath it, a plaque. The moment that changed everything. October 12th. Olivia stood there one afternoon, watching a new patient take her first steps in the therapy room next door. Leonard found her there. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She watched the woman stumble, then catch herself, watched her family cheer. "I'm thinking your father was right," Olivia said softly. "Legacy isn't what you build. It's who you help build themselves." Leonard stood beside her. "He'd be proud of you. He'd be proud of us." They watched together as another impossible thing became possible. Outside, in Thomas's garden, flowers bloomed in the afternoon sun, and somewhere in every person who'd learned to walk again, in every family reunited with hope, in every second chance given, Thomas's spirit lived on. Not in what he'd built, but in who he'd helped become whole.
Every doctor said it was impossible. Permanent nerve damage. No chance of recovery. Accept it and move on. James Nolan had accepted it. For 3 years, he'd accepted it, until that afternoon. He came home early and saw something that shouldn't have been possible. His son was standing. James stood frozen on the terrace, briefcase still in his hand. Stephen, his boy who hadn't stood in 3 years, was gripping Helen's shoulders, his legs trembling beneath him. Helen, the woman he'd hired to care for Stephen, knelt in the grass by the reflecting pool, her hands barely supporting his calves, and Stephen was standing. James couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It lasted 5 seconds, maybe less. Then Stephen's legs gave out and he collapsed into Helen's arms. Both of them were crying, laughing, holding each other like something sacred had just happened. James had spent $3 million on specialists, Harvard doctors, 12 of them. Every single one said the same thing. Stephen would never walk again. But here, right in front of him, was proof they were wrong. He should have felt joy, relief, gratitude. Instead, something cold gripped his chest. Because if this woman, someone with no medical degree, no credentials, someone he paid $18 an hour, could do what all those experts couldn't, then what did that say about every choice he'd made? Every time he'd told Stephen to accept his limitations, every time he'd chosen his company over being present, his voice came out sharp, colder than he intended. "What exactly are you doing with my son?" Helen turned, her eyes met his, calm, steady. Stephen's joy vanished, his face went pale. "Dad, But James wasn't listening. He was staring at Helen, his mind racing with liability, lawsuits, unauthorized treatment, risk. And in that moment, fear made the decision for him. Before we begin, like, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Because maybe you need to remember today, hope shows up in the most unexpected places. "Dad, please. She's helping me." Stephen's voice cracked across the terrace. He reached toward Helen, his small hands trembling. James didn't look at him. His eyes stayed fixed on Helen, who stood slowly, grass stains on her knees, water from the pool edge soaking through her clothes. "Mr. Nolan, if you'd just let me explain." "I don't need explanations. I need you to pack your things." The words came out flat, final. Helen's face didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Not anger, Something quieter, sadness maybe, or disappointment. Stephen wheeled himself forward, his voice rising. "Dad, you don't understand. I stood. I actually stood. She's been working with me for months and I'm getting stronger and, Stephen, go inside." "No, you can't do this. She's the only one who, inside, now." The boy's face crumpled. Tears spilled down his cheeks, but he didn't move. Just sat there in his wheelchair, staring at his father like he was looking at a stranger. James forced himself to stay firm. This was for Stephen's protection. False hope was worse than no hope. He'd learned that the hard way. "Helen, I'll have your final check ready by 6. Someone will bring your things to the front." Helen nodded once. She didn't argue, didn't plead. Just looked at Stephen, her expression soft. "You did so good today," she said quietly. "Don't forget that." Then she walked past James, her step steady, and disappeared into the house. Stephen watched her go. When she was out of sight, he turned to his father. "I hate you." The words were small, barely a whisper, but they landed like stones. Stephen spun his wheelchair around and rolled toward the house, his shoulders shaking. James stood alone by the pool, the afternoon sun warm on his face, the sound of water lapping gently against the stone edge. He'd done the right thing. He had to believe that. But dinner that night was silent. Stephen wouldn't look at him, wouldn't speak, just pushed his food around his plate until James finally told him he could go. By midnight, James sat in his study, the house dark around him. He'd called his lawyer earlier, confirmed the termination was clean, no liability, no risk. But he couldn't stop seeing it. Stephen's face when his legs held, the way Helen had barely been touching him, like she knew exactly how much support to give and when to let go. James reached for his laptop, pulled it open. He told himself he just needed to document what Helen had been doing, for legal protection, in case she tried to claim wrongful termination. But his hands hesitated over the keyboard. The security system had cameras everywhere, the pool, the terrace, the therapy room James had built 3 years ago, the one filled with expensive equipment that Stephen never used. James pulled up the footage from today, watched the moment he'd walked in on, watched Stephen stand, watched him fall, watched the joy on both their faces. Then he scrolled back. 1 day, 2 days, a week. And he kept watching. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. James sat in the blue glow of his laptop screen, the house silent around him. He'd been watching for an hour, maybe 2. He'd lost track. The footage showed everything. Helen arriving early every morning, a notebook tucked under her arm. Helen on her lunch break, laptop open, searching through medical journals and therapy research. Helen in the pool with Stephen, guiding his legs through exercises while she counted out loud, her voice patient and steady. "1 more, Stephen. You've got this. 1 more." James watched her celebrate when Stephen moved his ankle 3 inches to the left, watched her write it down in that worn notebook, the date and time, the exact measurement, watched her high-five his son like he'd just won a championship. There was no recklessness, no guessing, just weeks and weeks of careful, methodical work. James scrolled further back, found footage from 6 months ago, Stephen barely moving at all, Helen talking to him softly, telling him stories, making him laugh even when the exercises hurt. "Your mom would be so proud of you," she'd said once, her hand resting gently on Stephen's shoulder. "She'd see how hard you're trying." Stephen had cried that day, and Helen had just held him, not saying anything, just being there. James's throat tightened. He'd been so absent, so buried in work and grief, in his own guilt, that he couldn't see what was happening right in front of him. Helen hadn't been trying to replace the specialists. She'd been doing what they never did. She'd been present. James closed the laptop, sat back in his chair. The clock on the wall read 2:47 a.m. He should go to bed, try to sleep, deal with this in the morning. But he couldn't. He stood, walked upstairs, past Stephen's room. The door was cracked open. His son was asleep, finally, his face still streaked with dried tears. James's chest ached. He went to his own room, showered, put on jeans and a sweater, nothing fancy, nothing that screamed billionaire, just clothes. By 4 a.m., he was in his car. Helen's address was still in the employee files, a small apartment building 40 minutes outside the estate, the kind of neighborhood where people worked 2 jobs and still struggled to make rent. James parked across the street, bought 2 coffees from a corner shop that was just opening, sat in his car, and waited. The sun came up slowly, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. At 6:30, the building door opened. Helen stepped out, a bag over her shoulder, heading toward the bus stop. James's hands gripped the steering wheel. This was it. He could drive away, let her go, hire someone new, someone with credentials and a clean resume, someone who wouldn't make him feel like he'd failed his son. Or he could do the hardest thing he'd done in 3 years. He could admit he was wrong. James opened the car door and stepped into the morning light. Helen saw him immediately, stopped walking. Her expression shifted, guarded, careful. James crossed the street, the 2 coffees in his hands, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might break through his chest. When he reached her, he opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. I was wrong. The words scraped out of James's throat like broken glass. Helen stood on the sidewalk, her bag over her shoulder, the morning sun behind her. She didn't move, just watched him. James held out one of the coffees. His hand was shaking. I watched the footage, all of it. What you've been doing with Stephen. It's not careless, it's not reckless. His voice cracked. It's everything I should have been doing. Helen's eyes stayed on his face, reading him, measuring. I can't take back what I said yesterday, James continued. I can't undo firing you in front of my son, but I'm asking you, please, come back, full time, whatever terms you need. I'll sign anything. Just don't give up on him because I was too scared to believe. The street was quiet. A bus rumbled past. Somewhere a dog barked. Helen took the coffee, held it between her hands. I'm not doing this for you, Mr. Nolan, she said finally. I'm doing it for Stephen. I know. And if you doubt me again, if you let fear decide for you, I won't come back, not a second time. James nodded. I understand. They drove separately through the waking city, the sun climbing higher, traffic starting to build. When they pulled into the estate, the front door opened before they even parked. Stephen. He must have been waiting by the window all night. The boy wheeled himself down the ramp so fast he nearly tipped forward. When he reached Helen, she dropped to her knees on the gravel. Stephen threw his arms around her neck and held on like she was the only solid thing left in his world. You came back, he whispered. You came back. I'm here, Helen said softly. I'm not going anywhere. James stood by his car, watching his son cling to the woman who'd done what he couldn't. His throat burned. The household staff had gathered by the door. Cook, gardener, housekeeper, all of them watching. Some smiled. Some wiped their eyes. They'd seen what James had missed. That afternoon, James did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He canceled his meetings, all of them. He sat by the pool and watched Helen work with Stephen. Really watched. Saw the way she counted each movement, encouraged every effort, celebrated the smallest progress. Does it hurt? James asked Stephen during a break. Stephen looked surprised his father was even there. A little, but it's a good hurt. Like something's waking up. James's chest tightened. Later, as the sun started to set, Stephen looked up at his father. His voice was small, scared. Dad, you're not going to send her away again, are you? James knelt beside the wheelchair. No, I promise. You promised Mom you'd always be here too. And then you weren't. The words hit like a fist. James opened his mouth, closed it. He had no defense. I know, he said finally. But I'm here now, and I'm learning. Helen's teaching me too. Stephen studied his father's face, then nodded, just a little. That night, James made a call. Dr. Patricia Chen, a specialist he'd worked with years ago on a company case, someone who could provide medical oversight, protect what Helen was building. When he told Helen the next morning, she stiffened. "I'm not trying to replace you," James said quickly. "I'm trying to protect you. If this works, when this works, I want it documented by someone the medical world respects." Helen was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "All right." But neither of them saw the black sedan that pulled up to the estate gates that afternoon, or the man inside taking photos. Richard Strauss sat in his downtown office, reviewing the images his investigator had sent. Helen Grant with the boy, James Nolan watching them, all of it looking very, cozy. Richard leaned back in his leather chair and smiled. "Time to see what this woman's really made of," he murmured. He picked up his phone and made a call. 3 weeks passed. James started coming home earlier, not just on time, early. He'd sit by the pool during Stephen's sessions, asking questions, learning the names of exercises he'd never cared about before. Helen was patient with him, showed him how to spot Stephen during balance work, taught him which stretches helped and which ones pushed too hard. "Support here," she'd say, guiding James's hands to Stephen's lower back. "Not lifting, just steadying. Let him do the work." James watched his hands that signed billion-dollar contracts, tremble as they touched his son's back. Such a simple thing, but he'd forgotten how. Stephen was getting stronger. 10 seconds of standing became 15, then 20. His legs didn't shake as much. His smile came easier. One afternoon, Stephen looked up at his father during a break. "You're here a lot now." James set down his phone. "Is that okay?" "Yeah." Stephen's voice was quiet. I'm not used to it." The words stung, but they were true. "I'm sorry," James said. "For all the time I wasn't." Stephen looked down at his hands. "Mom used to say you were busy saving the world. That's why you couldn't be home." James's throat closed. "Your mom was kinder than I deserved. Do you miss her?" "Every day." "Me too." Stephen's eyes filled. "Sometimes I forget what her voice sounded like." "Is that bad?" James pulled his son close. "No, that's not bad. That's just what time does. It doesn't mean you loved her less." They sat like that for a while, the afternoon sun warm on their shoulders, the pool water lapping softly against the stone. Helen watched from across the terrace, giving them space. But when James looked up and met her eyes, something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or gratitude. That evening, Dr. Chen came for her weekly visit. She reviewed Helen's notes, watched video documentation of Stephen's progress, ran her own assessments. "This is remarkable," she said, looking between Helen and James. "Truly remarkable. I'll be presenting your methods at a conference next month, Helen, with your permission." Helen hesitated. "I don't know if that's... The medical community needs to see this," Dr. Chen insisted. "What you're accomplishing here could help so many families." James noticed Helen's discomfort but didn't understand it. Not yet. After Dr. Chen left, Helen was quieter than usual, distant. "What's wrong?" James asked. Helen shook her head. "Nothing, just tired." But that night, as she walked to her car, she noticed something. A man, sitting in a sedan across the street, camera in his lap. When he saw her looking, he started the engine and drove away. Helen stood in the driveway, her keys in her hand, her heart beating faster. She told herself she was being paranoid. But the next morning, when she arrived at the estate, there were 3 missed calls on her phone, all from the state medical board. Helen stared at her phone. 3 missed calls, 2 voicemails, 1 email with a subject line that made her stomach drop. Formal inquiry, unlicensed medical practice. She sat in her car in the estate driveway, hands shaking, reading the email twice, then 3 times. Someone had filed a complaint, anonymous, claiming she was practicing physical therapy without a license, claiming she was endangering a child. The medical board wanted to interview her, wanted documentation, wanted to know exactly what she'd been doing with Stephen Nolan. Helen closed her eyes and breathed. She'd been careful, so careful. Everything she did was based on research, adapted from legitimate therapeutic methods. Dr. Chen had reviewed it all, said it was sound. But sound didn't matter if someone wanted to destroy her. She got out of the car, walked toward the house, tried to keep her face calm. Stephen was waiting by the door, grinning. "Helen, Dad said we could do pool work today, can we?" "Please." She smiled, forced herself to smile. "Of course." But James saw it immediately. He'd gotten good at reading her these past few weeks, the small shifts in her expression, the way her shoulders tensed when something was wrong. "Stephen, go get changed," James said. "We'll meet you out back." When the boy wheeled away, James turned to Helen. "What happened?" "Nothing. I'm fine." Helen, she met his eyes, and something in his face, the concern, the steadiness, broke through her walls. "The medical board called. Someone filed a complaint against me." James went very still. "What kind of complaint?" "Practicing without a license, endangering a child." Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. "They want to interview me, review everything I've been doing with Stephen." James's jaw tightened. Who would... He stopped, thought, how would anyone even know what you're doing here? Helen remembered the man with the camera, the sedan that sped away when she looked. "I don't know," she said quietly, "but someone's been watching." James pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my lawyers right now." "Mr. Nolan," "James, and this isn't negotiable. Someone's targeting you because of my son. That makes it my problem." Helen wanted to argue, but the relief she felt was stronger than her pride. That afternoon, while Stephen practiced in the pool, James made calls. Lawyer after lawyer. His voice sharp, commanding, protective in a way Helen had never heard. Stephen didn't notice the tension. He was too focused on his progress, too happy that both his father and Helen were there. "Watch this," he called out, gripping the pool edge. He pulled himself up, legs steadying beneath him, and stood for 30 full seconds. Helen and James both clapped, but their smiles didn't quite reach their eyes. Later, after Stephen went inside to rest, James's lawyer called back. James stepped away to take it. Helen watched his face change as he listened, watched his expression go from concern to something darker. When he hung up, he stood there for a moment, staring at nothing. "What is it?" Helen asked. James turned to her. "My lawyer did some digging. The complaint came from someone with connections to Nolan Industries." Helen's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means this isn't about you." His phone buzzed. A text message. He looked at the screen and his face went pale. "It's about me." The text message was simple. 3 words. "We need to talk." It was from Richard Strauss, James's business partner of 15 years. James stared at the screen, his mind racing. Richard. Of course it was Richard. "What does it say?" Helen asked. James showed her. Helen's face went pale. "Why would your business partner file a complaint against me?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." That evening, after Stephen went to bed, James drove to Richard's house. A sprawling estate not unlike his own, all white stone and manicured lawns. Richard answered the door himself, smiled like they were old friends meeting for drinks. "James, come in." They sat in Richard's study. Leather chairs, expensive scotch, the kind of room where deals were made and lives were changed. "You filed a complaint against Helen Grant," James said. No preamble, no pleasantries. Richard's smile didn't falter. "I was concerned. For you. For Stephen. Concerned." "James, listen to yourself. You've been spending all your time at home, missing board meetings, canceling investor calls. The merger vote is in 6 weeks, and you're nowhere to be found." "My son is walking again." "Because of an unlicensed caregiver using God knows what methods." Richard leaned forward. "What happens when he gets hurt? When she pushes too far and something breaks? You'll be ruined. The company will be ruined." "Dr. Chen has reviewed everything. Helen's methods are sound." "Dr. Chen isn't on the board. The board is asking questions, James. about your priorities, about your judgment. James set down his glass. You're threatening me. I'm protecting you and the company. Step back from this distraction. Put Stephen in a proper facility with licensed professionals and focus on what matters. My son matters. Your son will be fine. But if you lose this company, if you lose everything you and I built, what kind of father does that make you? James stood. The kind who finally shows up. He walked out without looking back. But as he drove home, Richard's words circled in his mind. The merger, the board, the company he'd spent 20 years building. Could he really risk it all? When he got home, Helen was still awake, sitting in the kitchen with tea. What did he say? She asked. James told her. All of it. Helen was quiet for a long time. Then she set down her cup. Maybe he's right. James looked at her. What? Maybe I should step back just until the merger is done. You can hire someone licensed, someone who... No. Mr. Nolan. James, and no, I'm not letting him win. Helen's eyes filled. This isn't about winning. This is about Stephen and you. If you lose your company because of me, then I lose it. But I don't lose my son. Not again. The words hung between them. Helen looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. Before either of them could speak, James's phone buzzed. An email from an unknown sender. He opened it, read it, and his blood went cold. It was a photograph. Helen and Stephen by the pool. Intimate, close. The angle made it look wrong, like something it wasn't. Below the photo, a single line of text. Imagine what the media could do with this. Helen stared at the photo on James's phone, her hand on Stephen's shoulder, the boy looking up at her with complete trust. The angle twisted it into something ugly, something wrong. He's going to destroy me, she whispered. James's grip tightened on the phone. He's trying to scare us. It's working. The kitchen felt too small, too quiet. Helen stood, moved to the window, stared out at the dark estate grounds. I should leave, she said, before this gets worse, before he hurts Stephen with this. Helen, look at that photo, Mr. Nolan. Look at what he's turning this into. If that gets out, if people see it and think, her voice cracked, I can't do that to Stephen. I won't. James stood, crossed the kitchen, stood beside her at the window. 3 weeks ago, I fired you because I was afraid, he said quietly. Afraid of hope, afraid of change, afraid of admitting I'd failed my son. He turned to look at her. I'm not making that mistake again. This is different. This is your company, your reputation, everything you've built. I built a company. You're rebuilding my son. There's no comparison. Helen's eyes filled. You don't understand what men like Richard can do. I've seen it before. People like me, we're easy targets. No money, no lawyers, no protection. He'll make me look like you're not alone in this. The words settled between them like a promise. Helen wanted to believe him, but belief was dangerous. Belief got you hurt. That night, James couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Richard's threat, about the merger, about Stephen's face when he stood for 30 seconds today. His phone buzzed. A text from his head of security. Found something. Need to show you. Tomorrow morning. James sat up, read it again. Whatever his security team had found, it was enough to wait until morning. Enough to document carefully. Hope stirred in his chest, small, fragile, but there. Down the hall, Stephen lay awake too. He'd heard voices earlier, his father and Helen in the kitchen. He couldn't hear the words, but he knew the tone. Something was wrong. Stephen reached for his phone on the nightstand, pulled up the family calendar his father kept, saw the entry for next week. Board merger meeting, final vote. He didn't understand all of it, but he understood enough. His father was in trouble, and it had something to do with Helen. Stephen looked at his legs under the blanket, thought about how far he'd come, how much stronger he felt. Maybe there was something he could do. In the guest house, Helen sat on the edge of her bed, The threatening photo still burned into her mind. She'd been here before. Different city, different family, different accusations, but the same ending. People like her didn't win against people like Richard Strauss. She pulled out her phone, started typing a resignation letter to James. Dear Mr. Nolan. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Then she thought of Stephen's face today, the pure joy when he stood for 30 seconds. She deleted the letter. Whatever was coming, she'd face it. For him. Across town, in his office lit only by a desk lamp, Richard Strauss reviewed his plan. The photo was just the beginning. He had more, so much more. Anonymous tips to tabloid bloggers, contact information for concerned board members, a timeline for maximum damage. By the time he was done, James Nolan would be begging to step down as CEO. And that unlicensed caregiver? She'd never work again. Richard smiled and reached for his phone. Time to make the next move. James's security chief arrived at dawn. He spread documents across the dining room table, photos, bank records, phone logs. Richard Strauss hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago, he said. The same day Dr. Chen first visited. He's been tracking Helen's movements, Stephen's therapy sessions, your schedule. James stared at the evidence. Why? The merger. If it goes through as planned, you remain CEO. But there's a clause. If the board votes no confidence in your leadership, Richard takes over. He's been building a case that you're distracted. Unfit. Helen stood in the doorway, listening. Her hands were shaking. There's more, the security chief continued. He pulled out a recording device. Richard's assistant came forward yesterday, said she couldn't stay silent anymore. She recorded this conversation. He pressed play. Richard's voice filled the room, cold, calculating. James is so busy playing house with that woman and his crippled son, he can't see I'm positioning myself to take everything. The board already has doubts. One more push, and he's done. James's face went white. The recording continued. Get me everything on Helen Grant, every job she's been fired from, every family that let her go. I need her to look dangerous, unqualified, like someone who manipulates vulnerable families. Helen's breath caught. And if that doesn't work, the assistant's voice asked, then we make sure the photo I sent him ends up everywhere. Let the media decide what it means. By the time he fights back, the damage will be done. The recording stopped. Silence filled the room. James looked at Helen, saw the pain in her eyes, the fear. He was never going to stop, she whispered, no matter what I did. No, James said. He wasn't. He stood. His expression had changed. No more fear, no more doubt. The board meeting is in 3 days, he said. Richard's going to present his case, try to force me out. What are you going to do? Helen asked. James looked at the evidence spread across the table, then at Helen, then toward the stairs where Stephen was still sleeping. I'm going to show them the truth. That afternoon, James made calls, not to lawyers this time, to board members, trusted ones, people who'd known him for years. He told them everything, the investigation, the threats, Richard's plan. I'm asking you to trust me, he said. One more time. Come to the meeting. Hear what I have to say. And then decide. That evening, Stephen wheeled into his father's study. Dad, James looked up from his laptop. I want to come to your meeting, Stephen said. Stephen, it's not... I know what's happening. I heard you and Helen talking. Mr. Strauss is trying to hurt you because of me, because of her. James started to argue, but Stephen's face stopped him. I'm not a baby, Dad, and I'm not helpless. Not anymore. Stephen's voice was stronger than James had heard in years. Helen helped me stand. You helped me believe I could. Now let me help you. James stared at his son, saw the determination there, the courage. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. 2 days later, James received one final message from Richard. See you at the board meeting. Hope you've made your peace with losing everything. James deleted it. He'd already lost everything once. The day his wife died and his son stopped believing in himself, he wasn't losing anything ever again. The morning of the board meeting, James stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. Helen appeared in the doorway. "Ready?" she asked. James turned, looked at her. This woman who'd walked into his life and changed everything. "Thank you," he said, "for not giving up on him, on us." Helen's eyes filled. "Thank you for coming back." Downstairs, Stephen waited in his wheelchair, dressed in his best clothes. The three of them drove to Nolan Industries headquarters together. As they walked into the building, James felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The boardroom doors opened, and Richard Strauss was already waiting. The boardroom was silent. 23 board members, attorneys, executives, all watching as Richard stood at the head of the table, his presentation ready. "Thank you all for coming," Richard began, his voice smooth. "I know this is uncomfortable, but leadership demands difficult conversations." He pulled up a slide. Photos of James leaving work early, calendar entries showing missed meetings. "James Nolan has been my partner for 15 years, but in recent months his focus has shifted. Personal matters have consumed his attention during the most critical merger in our company's history." James sat quietly, Helen beside him, Stephen's wheelchair at the end of the table. Richard continued. "I have evidence of household staff overstepping boundaries, unlicensed medical treatment, a pattern of judgment that puts both his family and this company at risk." He pulled up the photo, Helen and Stephen by the pool. The angle still twisted, still ugly. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not questioning James's love for his son," Richard said. "I'm questioning whether personal crisis should dictate corporate leadership." He sat down, looking satisfied. James stood slowly. "Thank you, Richard, for showing everyone exactly who you are." He nodded to his attorney, who began distributing folders to each board member. "Inside, you'll find bank records showing Richard hired a private investigator to stalk my son's caregiver, phone logs proving he filed a false complaint with the medical board, and recordings, provided by his own assistant, of Richard planning to manufacture evidence against me." The room went still. James played the recording. Richard's voice filled the boardroom, cold, calculating, admitting everything. When it finished, the silence was deafening. Richard's face had gone pale. "This is... You can't... I can. And I am." James's voice was steel. "You didn't just come after me, Richard. You came after my son. You tried to destroy a woman whose only crime was helping a child walk again." He turned to the board. Helen Grant accomplished what 12 specialists couldn't, not through recklessness, through patience, research, belief. Dr. Patricia Chen has documented everything. It's all in your folders. James paused, then gestured to Stephen. "But you don't have to take my word for it." Stephen gripped the armrests of his wheelchair. His hands were shaking, but his face was set with determination. Helen moved to his side, but Stephen shook his head. "I want to try alone." The room held its breath. Stephen pushed himself up. His legs trembled, but they held. And then, step by step, he walked. 12 deliberate steps across the boardroom floor to where his father stood. Someone gasped. Another board member wiped her eyes. When Stephen reached James, his father's arms went around him, holding him steady. "Helen didn't just help me walk," Stephen said, his young voice clear in the silent room. "She helped my dad remember how to be my dad." James's eyes closed. His son's words landed in a place he didn't know was still broken. The board voted immediately. Richard was removed, not just from merger leadership, from the company entirely. He left without a word, his face twisted with fury. 3 months later, the Helen Grant Foundation opened its doors, a building downtown filled with light and hope, free therapy for families who'd been told impossible. At the ribbon cutting, Stephen walked across the stage, no assistance, no help, and handed his father the scissors. The crowd erupted in applause. But the moment James would remember forever came that evening. They sat by the reflecting pool, the three of them, Stephen's legs dangling in the water, strong enough now to kick gently. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Stephen asked. "What?" James said. "Mom. I think she would have liked Helen." Helen's breath caught. James looked at her, saw the tears in her eyes. "Yeah," he said softly. "She would have." Stephen smiled, leaned his head against his father's shoulder, and in that moment, sitting by the water where everything changed, James understood something he'd missed for so long. Grace doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it shows up quiet, steady, in the form of a woman who believed when no one else would. Sometimes it shows up in a son who forgives. Sometimes it shows up in a second chance you don't deserve but receive anyway. Helen reached over, squeezed James's hand once. He squeezed back. And in the fading light, they sat together. Not as employer and employee. Not as broken people trying to fix each other. But as family. The kind that doesn't come from blood. The kind that comes from showing up. From believing. From refusing to let fear win. The kind worth fighting for.